Bogota, Colombia, home to vibrant culture, stunning landscapes, and La Modelo prison. Built in 1960, La Modelo was meant to be a model penitentiary. Modern, humane, a symbol of progress, it became the opposite. La Modelo is now infamous, a place of despair, violence, and corruption, a concrete jungle where the law struggles to hold on. Overcrowding is rampant. Thousands of inmates crammed into a space meant for far fewer. The air is thick with tension. Fear hangs heavy. This is a place where survival is the only law that matters. La Modelo is a microcosm of Colombia's struggles. It reflects the nation's history of conflict, inequality, and the corrosive power of the drug trade. But within its walls there are also stories of resilience, of hope flickering in the darkest corners. This is the reality of La Modelo. The decline of La Modelo was not immediate. It was a slow, almost imperceptible descent into chaos that took years to fully manifest. The prison, once a symbol of law and order, gradually became a breeding ground for anarchy and violence. It was a gradual descent into chaos. Over time, the number of inmates swelled beyond the facility's capacity. Cells designed for a few men were crammed with dozens. The prison yard, once a place for limited recreation, became a battleground for survival. As Colombia grappled with drug cartels and internal conflict, the prison system buckled under the strain. Overcrowding became the norm. Resources dwindled. Guards were overwhelmed, unable to maintain order amidst the growing chaos. The influence of powerful drug cartels seeped into the prison walls, further complicating the already dire situation. The guards, outnumbered and outgunned, lost control. They faced daily threats and violence, often finding themselves at the mercy of the very inmates they were supposed to oversee. Riots became frequent, and the thin veneer of control the authorities had was shattered. Into this vacuum stepped the gangs. These were not just any gangs, but highly organized and ruthless groups that saw an opportunity to seize power. They moved swiftly, filling the void left by the incapacitated guards. Powerful, organized, and ruthless, they quickly took control of La Modelo. They brought with them a level of organization and brutality that the prison had never seen before. Their leaders, often seasoned criminals, knew exactly how to exploit the weaknesses of the system. They established their own hierarchies, their own laws, their own brutal methods of enforcement. The prison became a kingdom unto itself, with gang leaders acting as kings, ruling over their subjects with an iron fist. Punishments for disobedience were swift and merciless. The Colombian government, struggling to maintain order outside the prison walls, could do little to stop them. The authorities were stretched thin, dealing with widespread violence and corruption throughout the country. La Modelo became a low priority in the grand scheme of national security. These gangs thrive on extortion, drug trafficking, and violence. Inside the prison, they replicated the criminal enterprises they ran on the outside. Drugs flowed freely, and extortion became a way of life. Inmates who could not pay were subjected to brutal punishments. They control everything from food rations to cell assignments. The gangs decided who ate and who starved, who lived in relative comfort and who suffered in squalor. This control extended to every aspect of prison life, making survival dependent on one's allegiance to the gang. They hold immense power, not just over the inmates, but often over the guards as well. Guards who resisted were threatened or bribed into compliance. Many chose to turn a blind eye to the gang's activities, fearing for their own lives and the lives of their families. La Modelo became a microcosm of the Colombian underworld, a place where the gangs ruled with an iron fist. It was a stark reminder of the broader issues plaguing the country, a symbol of how deeply entrenched criminal organizations had become in every facet of society. Violence is a constant threat within La Modelo's walls. The prison, notorious for its overcrowded conditions, is a breeding ground for conflict. With too many inmates crammed into too little space, tensions run high, and tempers flare at the slightest provocation. Fights erupt over the smallest things, a cigarette, a debt, a perceived disrespect. These altercations can quickly escalate into full-blown brawls, drawing in dozens of inmates and often resulting in serious injuries or even death. The lack of adequate supervision and intervention only exacerbates the situation. Weapons, often crude and improvised, are readily available. Inmates fashion knives from scrap metal, sharpened toothbrushes, and other everyday items. These makeshift weapons are a testament to the resourcefulness born out of desperation and the need for self-defense in such a hostile environment. The guards, even if they wanted to intervene, are often powerless to stop the bloodshed. Outnumbered and under-equipped, they face the constant threat of retaliation from the inmates. Corruption is equally pervasive, further undermining their authority and effectiveness. Guards, poorly paid and vulnerable to threats, are easily bribed. The low wages and dangerous working conditions make them susceptible to corruption. In exchange for money or protection, they turn a blind eye to the illicit activities that flourish within the prison walls. They turn a blind eye to the gang activity, to the drugs, to the violence. The gangs, well organized and ruthless, exert significant control over the prison population. They operate with impunity, knowing that the guards will not interfere. Some even collaborate with the gangs, providing them with information, weapons, and access to the outside world. This collusion further blurs the lines between the enforcers and the offenders, creating a dangerous and volatile environment. In La Modelo, the line between the law enforcers and the lawbreakers becomes blurred. The guards, meant to uphold order, often find themselves complicit in the very chaos they are supposed to prevent. This erosion of authority undermines any efforts to establish a semblance of control. This toxic mix of violence and corruption creates a climate of fear and impunity. Inmates live in constant dread, knowing that their safety is never guaranteed. The pervasive sense of danger affects every aspect of prison life, from daily routines to interactions with fellow inmates. Inmates live in a state of constant anxiety, never knowing when they might become the next victim. The ever-present threat of violence hangs over them like a dark cloud, influencing their behavior and interactions. Trust is a rare commodity, and alliances are often formed out of necessity rather than genuine camaraderie. The authorities, either complicit or overwhelmed, seem unable or unwilling to break the cycle. The systemic issues of corruption, underfunding, and overcrowding create an environment where violence and lawlessness thrive. Without significant reforms, the cycle of violence and corruption is likely to continue unabated. The tensions simmering within La Modelo have boiled over into full-scale riots on numerous occasions. These eruptions of violence are not isolated incidents, but rather a recurring nightmare that haunts the prison's history. The roots of these riots run deep, embedded in the very fabric of the prison's daily life. These are not mere protests. They are desperate, chaotic eruptions of violence. The inmates, driven by a sense of hopelessness and despair, often see no other way to voice their grievances. The riots are a brutal form of communication, a way for the prisoners to express their anguish and frustration. Inmates, pushed to the breaking point by overcrowding, inhumane conditions, and the constant threat of violence, lash out against anything and anyone in their path. The overcrowded cells, often holding double or triple their intended capacity, become pressure cookers of tension and aggression. The lack of basic amenities, such as clean water, adequate food, and medical care, exacerbates the situation. One of the most infamous riots occurred in 1985. This particular riot stands out not only for its scale, but also for the sheer brutality that unfolded. The events of that year left an indelible mark on the prison's history, a grim reminder of the consequences of neglect and mismanagement. Fueled by gang warfare and a lack of basic necessities, the riot quickly spiraled out of control. The prison's internal power struggles, combined with the scarcity of essential resources, created a volatile environment. Gangs, vying for control and dominance, turned the prison into a battleground. Inmates took over entire cell blocks, taking hostages and battling with guards. The guards, often outnumbered and ill-equipped, found themselves in a desperate fight to regain control. The hostages, both fellow inmates and prison staff, became pawns in a deadly game of survival. the Colombian government sent in the army to quell the uprising, resulting in a bloodbath. The military intervention, while intended to restore order, only added to the chaos and violence. The use of force, rather than addressing the underlying issues, led to a tragic loss of life. Dozens of inmates were killed, and many more were injured. The aftermath of the riot was a scene of devastation, with bodies strewn across the prison grounds and the wounded crying out for help. The scars left by the violence were not just physical but also deeply psychological. These riots are stark reminders of the failure of La Modelo. They highlight the systemic issues that plague the prison system, from corruption and mismanagement to the lack of adequate funding and resources. The riots are a symptom of a much larger problem, one that requires comprehensive reform. They are the consequences of neglecting the basic rights and needs of the incarcerated. The failure to provide humane treatment and adequate living conditions creates an environment ripe for unrest. The prisoners, stripped of their dignity and basic human rights, are left with little choice but to rebel. Each riot leaves behind a trail of destruction, both physical and psychological, and serves as a chilling testament to the desperation that festers within the prison's walls. The physical damage, from broken cell doors to charred remains of prison facilities, is a visible reminder of the chaos. However, the psychological toll on both inmates and staff is far more insidious, leaving lasting scars that are not easily healed.